I'm Karey O'Hara. I'm an assistant research professor in the Department of Psychology at Arizona State. So this paper was really about children's experiences with conflict between their parents after a separation or divorce. And we studied a sample of 559 children. Their parents were either separated or divorced in the last couple of years. And what we really wanted to know is how their experience with being exposed to conflict between their parents predicted what we call threat appraisals. And we were really zeroed in on one type of threat appraisal that's particularly salient for kids who experience divorce, and that is the fear that they're going to be abandoned by either one parent or both parents. So in the conflict literature, children's exposure to conflict has been studied for decades, primarily in married families. We know that this is the risk factor for children for lots of reasons. When we measure exposure to conflict, we measure the frequency with which it occurs and the intensity. In this study, we went a little bit further and we studied maybe less frequent forms of conflict that are usually investigated. Particularly for children from divorced families, they can get what we call caught in the middle. And so parents are either using them to send messages from one parent to the other, or they're bad-mouthing the other parent to the child, making them feel like they have to pick sides. And so we, in our construct of conflict in this study, we use frequency, intensity, but we also included this feeling of being caught in the middle and also bad-mouthing. And we know from prior literature that fear that you're going to be abandoned is something that children often think about after their parents get divorced. And even though it might be unlikely, it's not illogical, right? Because they see their family has changed, that their family has, one parent has presumably left the home. And so you can imagine for a child, particularly young children, that they might then, follows then that, well, maybe I'm going to be abandoned too. The primary finding was that indeed, conflict predicted fear of abandonment, and then in turn, fear of abandonment predicted mental health problems 10 months later. So now we know that for children from divorced and separated families, fear of abandonment is one link between exposure to conflict and development of mental health problems down the road. We know that that's one pathway through which that link happens. What I found the most interesting is digging into that a little bit more. We actually found that there was a difference when it came to mothers versus fathers. So for children who reported on their relationship with their mother, exposure to conflict was related to fear of abandonment. So higher conflict, higher fear of abandonment. That was the same for children who reported on their relationships with their fathers, but only if they had a really strong relationship with their father. So for the children who reported low or moderate quality of relationship with their father, there was no link between conflict and fear of abandonment. One of the things that we concluded from that was that, children have a lot to lose if they have a really high quality relationship with their dad. And if conflict is threatening that, it makes sense that there would be more fear of abandonment. What we found even more interesting is when we looked at that effect a little bit closer, we found that there was this effect where the relationship between conflict and fear of abandonment really depended on that quality of father-child relationship, both for better and for worse. So when conflict was low, children really benefited from a high-quality relationship with their father. But that same high-quality relationship came at a cost when conflict was high. Fortunately, many more kids in our sample, about 35% of our sample, benefited from a high-quality relationship with their father under the circumstances of low conflict, and only about 5% were in that range where they had really high conflict, good relationships with their fathers, and it really came at a cost because they also had high fears of abandonment.